Welcome to Markets Now. I'm Michelle. Work with Vince Boddicker, Farmers Trading Company. As it stands here during the mid-session, we have corn and soybeans lower, wheat to the plus side. Cattle market is seeing some mixed trade, but we're lower in hogs. Okay, so let's start off with corn and soybeans, Vince. It looks like maybe we are trading these South American weather forecasts, or in particular Brazil.
I think so, especially for the bean market. It fluctuates during the day, as we saw yesterday. That noon forecast came out a bit dry, and we'd rallied up. And this morning it looks a little wetter again, so we're down. And March has been interesting over the last 5 days. We've been finding support at the 200-day moving average and resistance at the 20. One of these days we're going to break out of there, and I think it all depends if it rains or if it doesn't.
Yeah, we'll have a little bit more clarity, don't you think, after the first of the year, or it will become a lot more urgent for the market to determine, whether this crop has really had damage and what we're going to do from a price reaction standpoint?
I think so. We're still in those early stages of development that you can do lots of good things yet if you get some rains. And the other thing, like we probably can't forget about, is last week when the new Argentine president devalued their peso about 53% or whatever it was, and definitely made a difference. But longer term, it's probably a good thing for everybody.
Yeah. Well, he did announce, or the government did announce, they're actually going to increase the export tax for both soybean meal and soybean oil to align it with
Yes,
soybeans now. And so they just kind of continue to maneuver down there, don't
I
they?
do. Yes, and I saw that you want to go from 31 to 33%, I think,
Right.
on the tax. And I thought when they were doing everything else the way they were, they might lower it, but they did just the opposite.
Yeah, farmers not happy about that in Argentina for sure. What is your assessment about exports? Because we saw another 4.85 million bushels of export business this morning, though there has been rumors of bigger purchases by China again.
They're not bad. They're not as good as I would like to see them, but the state of, how do you want to put it, negotiate, not negotiations, but this the state between the U.S. and China of tensions. I think we're doing okay. I thought they maybe wouldn't do anything with us, and they're doing something. I did see a story, early last week, I think it was, that talked about um, China even canceling some cargoes coming out of Brazil.
Now, the corn market seems to be following soybeans. We also have heard of border closures on the US Mexico border, maybe slowing some of our corn going into Mexico. Is that a little bit of a factor here?
One has to think it is that those are the two bridges that they closed are the main sources of our corn going to Mexico. They're trying to, as we all know, watch the legal immigrants coming into. Amazing, I didn't figure that out sooner, but it definitely has to have an effect on there. As you and I discussed, they are our biggest customer at the present time.
Yeah. Technically, where do we need to hold here in corn, you think?
I think you really need to hold those lows that you had in November. And I have to go back and look. What's it, 367? I think, or 467 in March. I think it is. If we start closing below that, it may tumble fairly quickly. Last time it came down there and closed below the 471, it really didn't. And hopefully, we can hold above those levels and not have to test those.
Yeah, certainly a chart point to watch. Wheat market is going the opposite direction there. So is that geopolitical, you think?
I think it is, and I think you worry about the attacks in the Red Sea and several companies saying we're not shipping through that lane anymore. So is it going to make a difference what kind of grain comes out of Russia and Ukraine, at least short term, on where we go? And I think the world's thinking about that. But as we look at, we had that big 7 to 8 day rally that was totally impressive, and now we're sideways to lower. And you just wonder if wheat didn't do what it needed to do there. It still doesn't have a big story on its own. Not that it can't down the road, but at present it doesn't. And I would think sideways to lower is where we may drift short term.
Of course, that rally you talk about was really on the heels of this China SRW business being confirmed. And do you think we'll see more business there? And is the market disappointed we haven't seen it? Is that another reason we might be drifting?
The trade sure could be disappointed you didn't get more, but I think if you look at traditionally what we do with China annually on business, I think we've done pretty good, and I don't think it's going to run away. But we look at what they've told us, how big their crop was on all the grains this year. but they're still importing more beans and wheat than they have in the past years. So again, can we believe those sources out of China? Probably not.
Yeah. Okay, let's move over to cattle. Mixed markets in both the live and feeder cattle futures. We've had a pretty good correction here, higher weekly closes last week. But Vince, have we corrected enough? Are we up into resistance we can't take out, or is this market just waiting for cash trade news, or maybe waiting for the cattle on feed numbers?
I think we're definitely waiting on cash news on the live. Last week, we were fortunate enough to get some 170s late in the day on Friday, which put us 50 to a buck lower. If we could be steady this week or maybe a little higher, I think that would be encouraging. I think that's what trade wants to see. We've had big kills last week. I think they were 14,000 bigger than the week before and 27,000 bigger than the same week in 2022. And we're looking at, I think, another 640 to 650,000 killed this week, which helps get those cattle moved. And in that case, you got to believe the Packer's making money if he's killing that much, and he wants to keep going if he's making it. But where do we go on the feeder side? I think we're waiting again, cash fat cattle, but more so if we go back and look at January, before we took the big blast breakdown into the lower $2 region, we kept bouncing between 225 and 233. And you got to wonder somewhere in that area if we're not going to get there fairly quickly. And then maybe we have to flounder around short term to see just where that cash is going.
And we also have to work through these bigger weights, right?
Definitely, yes. We're definitely up there as you and I discussed earlier. If we look at last week's WASDE report, we did have USDA and their projections for 2024 increase the beef production by 180 million pounds. And that's the third or fourth month in a row we've done that. And just looking at that 180 million pounds quantifies to about 3 weeks worth of kill. And then we look last week, I think that beef production report was 547 million pounds, which was 5.7% more than the same week in 2022. So we've got weights, we've got numbers that we got to get through over the next month or two. And that's definitely going to keep a lid over the top of how aggressive the Packers going to get unless we just get some outstanding demand.
Plus, I know you've mentioned maybe more imports from Mexico and Canada too, right?
Yes, Canada really hasn't done much more, but Mexico has imported more feeders this year just because of their drought, getting it to where the corn is at versus bringing the corn to them.
Gotcha. Hogs are lower this morning. Of course, we have a hogs and pigs report out on Friday, but that market has just continued to have issues here with upfront supplies and cash and cutout values not being able to catch, right?
Definitely. Yeah, there's no doubt on that. I think when we look at the cutouts, they've held fairly well in comparison to where the hogs have been. And I think that's helping support that market. But yeah, the shock of roughly 4% more hogs being slaughtered than USDA gave us in their September report has been a burden on the market. And hopefully somewhere in the next 2 to 4 weeks, we're going to start lightening up on those numbers.
Yeah. And while Mexico has been a great export customer, we're kind of devoid of that China export business, aren't we?
We are. And I looked at a report this morning, and I think for the calendar year, we are down 6% on exports to China. And I think if we look at the marketing year, we're down something like 52%. So these last few months have really been pathetic on that pork to China.
Yeah, it's been a tough several months here for the pork producers for sure. All right, thanks for joining us. Vince Boddicker, Farmers Trading Company. That is Markets Now.